to the presentation of the results of the Automotive Committee within the third round of AI4People. And I'm happy that we have so many distinguished guests here from many corners of the world. Let me, before starting with the presentation of the results, let me say you can, I would suggest if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box during the presentation already, so nothing gets lost or we don't get overwhelmed at the end. So I will be presenting, and then we will have 3 commentators as the program shows, and then we will have our Q&A. Good, so let's start with my presentation, with our presentation. You can see it? Yep, great. So these are the ethical guidelines for the automotive sector, fundamental requirements, as well as practical recommendations for industry and policymakers. This is our committee, and I'm happy to say that we brought together the expertise of both practitioners as well as researchers from the fields of ethics, law, philosophy, engineering, technology, and policy. So I am the chairman of this committee. I'm Christoph Lütge. I'm a professor of business ethics at the Technical University of Munich and the director of the Institute for Ethics in AI. Next, we have Ida Acosta. She's at the Ministry of Transport, Mobility, and the Urban Agenda, as she's also affiliated with the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, and she's also here. Welcome. Then we have David Danks. David Danks is a professor of philosophy at the Department of Philosophy and Department of Psychology of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, USA. So nice to see you here, even if it's a little early, but I think it hopefully we do. Third is Gail Gotterer. She is a lawyer and working for a law office in New York. She's not here, as I see, no. We have Nikolai Lucian Mihet from the Faculty of Engineering at Østfold University College in Norway. Then we have Dr. Aisha Nazir, who is head of AI ethics at Fujitsu Laboratories of Europe, and she's also here and will be commentating. Welcome. And finally, Franziska Possler is here. She is working here at the Technical University of Munich at the Institute for Ethics in AI, and she is also one of our co-authors. So what have we achieved? First of all, let me say this is something that's very close to my heart, since I have been doing a lot of research over the years in this field, as well as the others in this committee, of course. And we set ourselves a number of overall goals for this committee to achieve. So first, we wanted to create a clearer vision and a moral compass for this sector. And that for us means that we need to bring ethics as well as the technical part and also to some extent the economic part together. We don't want to create additional barriers to innovation, but we want to encourage an innovation. And as I like to say, AI will not fly without ethics. And this holds very much, I believe, for the automotive sector, where we will only have innovation if we also pay attention to the right ethical guidelines and also regulation. We want to provide the automotive sector with practical guidelines. So we have, as you will see, we have policy recommendations as well as industry recommendations for our specific points. The distinction between the two is not always totally straightforward. There are some blurred boundaries, but that's inevitable, as we believe. But it was crucial for us to develop some guidelines that can also find use and which are not too remote from the day-to-day business. In terms of ethics, third, we of course paying respect to fundamental human rights, to human dignity, the right to self-determination and liberty, the right to the protection of personal data, the right to equality and non-discrimination, as well as the maybe new right to explanation. This is, of course, something that's fundamental for many of the committees. And we focus finally on the 7 key requirements that are on top of this year's agenda. And these are human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination and fairness. This is one. Societal and environmental well-being, as well as accountability. And let me just add one remark here, because we found that transparency is a topic that is present in many of these other aspects. And that's why we chose to put transparency not as a separate topic, but one that's an overarching topic to all the others. So we come, here are the guidelines, and of course we can't present all of them here, but I will focus on some of the most important ones. So first, for the human agency and oversight topic. We, as you see here the 2 different sections, industry recommendations as well as policy recommendations. In short, we suggest first to include a conditional override option, depending on the level of autonomous or automated driving that the car is going on. This is a point which might seem minor, but we believe it's quite an important one. So we, for example, we suggest for driving levels up to 3 to have an override option at any time for level 4, which should correspond to safety mechanisms of an AV, and for level 5, so basically driverless cars, we would not require it. And this would also depend on the state and behavior of the driver, so for example, impaired ability of the driver. Second, we propose to monitor drivers. So AVs should continuously assess and monitor the driver's attentiveness and ability to intervene. So for example, the car could the car could, during operation or before operation, could pose control questions to the driver. For example, did you take any drugs or alcohol? It could use sensors, biometric technology to monitor. And there we focus on the upcoming UN regulation on automated lane keeping systems, which could serve as a baseline. Certainly, the handover procedures are important to design, and AVs should learn about the driver's capabilities and response times during operation from the data. What is important here, we are, of course, proposing that the training of drivers will need to adapt to what AVs can do and will be able to do. Training programs, for example, should be tailored to different demographic groups and exhibit minimum elements that could be regarded in training curriculum. For example, the limitations and capabilities of autonomous vehicles. And AVs should, for example, offer a training mode for the first kilometers to train drivers on the functioning of the AV. Fourth, we insist to develop human-machine interfaces that would clearly communicate about the vehicle's motion intention and awareness of other traffic participants to humans outside the vehicle, in whatever way that should be done. We finally, in terms of policy recommendations, we propose to establish external oversight mechanisms. We should also determine standards which should be as global as possible. I think this is a very important point to make here. To what extent will we see global standards for AVs? This is something that in the EU is currently underway. Hopefully that process will be done soon. We will certainly have to look beyond that and see what standards could be achieved. And maybe we do not need global standards for everything, but we are focusing as global as possible, we are saying. And policymakers in each jurisdiction should also consider designating an organization in each jurisdiction that is allowed to look at the code and the data within the AV in the event of a fatal accident involving one of these vehicles. Next, next there is technical robustness and safety. So first, of course, the prime requirement of autonomous vehicles should be safety. We first propose to consider different forms of potential threats. And these are cybersecurity threats in particular. Here, that goes basically without saying, companies need to comply with regulations in this field for cybersecurity management systems. There is a guideline which could serve as one to design cybersecurity into AVs throughout the entire development life cycle process. So SAE J3061. We also were saying these cybersecurity management systems should be tested. These vehicles should pass an official test that assures the system's accuracy, reliability, and adequacy of fallback options. So again, the SAE, driving safety performance assessment metrics, and the IEEE P7009 standard could serve as a baseline. Of course, these are details, but which are interesting to, I recommend to have a look at that in more detail. Then we suggest to develop fallback plans, so fail-safe mechanisms for autonomous cars. We also suggest that regulations should be developed that reflect consensus on the method by which to grant approval to these systems, which is not totally clear at the moment, I believe. The tests should be developed on a stepwise basis or in a stepwise method. I think it's, or we believe it's not something that should come all at once, but that is a stepwise approach. And in this approach, we should also work on harmonizing definitions and standards. What is, for example, what is a safe condition for a car? What is the minimal risk condition? What is the minimum risk maneuver for a car? There we have again an SAE-based guideline that can be used as a baseline here. And these are a lot of. It might not seem very spectacular, all these things in detail, but I think it's very important that these cars work on an everyday basis. They are not just the exceptional conditions which we need to focus on, but the day-to-day working and functioning of these cars. And for these, we believe that these guidelines are crucial. When it comes to privacy and data governance, we suggest first distinguishing between different types of data. companies should communicate privacy policies in a transparent way. They should require affirmative and explicit consent by the driver in a suitable way. They should limit sharing data with third parties. Of course, comply with data protection regulations and define necessities and legitimate purposes for data sharing. This will be quite an important topic to consider. What are legitimate purposes for data sharing? There are a number of standards and regulations here. Of course, the GDPR, but also others that need to be taken into account. It should also be, for manufacturers, be clear to define who can have access to the data and under which conditions. Yes, that should do for this. Next topic is a very important one when it comes to ethics of AI in general, and that is diversity, fairness, and non-discrimination. So first, there is a general guideline which was already adopted some years ago for the Ethics Committee for Autonomous Driving in Germany. We are again saying here that these cars, when driving and working both under exceptional as well as under day-to-day conditions, they should not make distinctions based on personal features. The famous example, of course, is here the trolley dilemmas, and so we should not distinguish when on the basis of age or ethnicity or gender or whatever personal features. These cars should also be tested for an unfair bias that they might exhibit. They should permit a responsible balancing of risks. This is probably crucial since a lot of risks in day-to-day operation need to be taken into account. Distances to neighboring cars, to pedestrians, to cyclists, and so on. Of course, they should strive for non-discriminatory overall design. And what is important, to regulate the process before authorization onto the market. To go a little bit more into the details, again, if we are saying personalization of AVs, this is a huge topic. We're seeing personalization of many AI systems, which is an inherent feature actually, but it should be accessible by design and as inclusive as possible. For example, including disabilities or recognizing people with disabilities and taking them into account. Here, before releasing these cars then onto the streets, companies should demonstrate their plans and actions to ensure that these customizing options to their vehicles work in the way that they were intended. And again, since explainability or explicability is a key general principle for AI ethics, we are also we are saying that consideration should be given to requiring car makers to explain the procedures they have put in place to make these designs accessible and avoid biases before granting authorization. When it comes to environmental and societal well-being, we are of course referring to the Sustainable Development Goals. We are here, this is a very broad topic where we have spent quite some time on. So, for example, automotive companies should consider integrating and providing benefits of increased public health and mobility, of better traffic flow and decreased carbon emission. This is quite important in terms of sustainability and contribution of AVs for greater sustainability. Also, we suggest that manufacturers should offer by default an eco-driving mode with a speed average that avoids unnecessary acceleration or braking and reduces emissions. And so improving traffic flow, decreasing emissions, and also following a stepwise implementation process. This is probably important since AVs need to be integrated for a long time into existing transport systems instead of having a competition or a total substitution of one of the other. So, and that means a lot of question on it also in terms of ethics. Where should we prioritize research and development of AI solutions? We encourage, we suggest that the actors in this field should collaborate. So the manufacturers or OEMs should collaborate with other actors such as private sector leaders and national agencies in fostering innovation and progress. For example, making use of projects that investigate differing mobility models. When it comes to accountability, this is probably a key aspect from my experience especially for the companies working in the sector, also other organizations certainly, but we need to have a firm agenda on how to implement accountability here before these systems can be deployed in a large scale. So we suggest implementing explicit measures of transparency. For example, about the scope and process of their internal audits and of their risk assessments. So it will be important to see how do we weigh certain risks. I mean, these transparency needs to be there so people have some idea how the cars and the AVs will behave. Regular audits should be conducted both internally and externally to assess potential risks to the safe operation of AVs and subsequently optimize their systems. Performance should be reported regularly and negative impact should be reported. This is probably something that it should not be too difficult since we have reporting in so many areas already, for example, in the CSR reporting, which was just some years ago introduced. So this is not something totally new to the companies working in this sector. Also, we have some specifics about the mechanisms of black boxes. There again, we refer to upcoming UN regulation. Also, we focus on the regulations for product liability, since this is a key point here. Without the changes in the liability structures, we will not see these cars being I mean, at least the higher levels of autonomy on the streets. And I should also add at this point that the regulations for this sector, this is something that in the EU people have worked on it for some time, but we are still waiting to see the results. So here we include a clear call for producing now these regulations and to clarify where the responsibilities lie in certain situations, and of course also to ensure that privacy and cybersecurity damages are taken into account. We are also suggesting that test centers should be established which regularly request that companies perform conformity assessments and provide certifications. So to conclude, here are some key takeaways. The first, a responsible balancing of risks or of estimated harm should be permitted at any time for the AVs. This for some it may sound straightforward, but for others it is not. Life is about risks, about balancing risks, and so is is the use of AVs. It will not be without risks, but it also offers a lot of potential for ethical benefits in terms of saving lives, reducing accidents, reducing fatalities significantly, and many others. And we need to come to a responsible balancing of these risks. Second, we as a committee believe that a large-scale introduction of full-mode AVs, so that would mean level 4 and higher, onto the streets is unlikely in the short run. So we should consider a more incremental step-by-step approach. And I think in the past there we have seen some setbacks also on the part of some companies, which at first thought we could take a giant leap from 0 to level 4, let's say, exaggerating a bit, but we will need to work on a more incremental basis, and that will be the way forward. And that also means in terms of ethics, of course, to work on those guidelines that we have presented and implement them in these incremental step-by-step approaches. And finally, I can't stress more that we need to develop a clear regulatory framework, and we don't have much time to do that. When we see there is a lot of international competition in this field, so the policymakers are called to work on this and present results soon. So in the future, we encourage stakeholders in the automotive sector to rely on these recommendations to determine relevant actions and to ensure that autonomous vehicles comply with ethical principles. Thank you very much. Wonderful. So then let me start with our first commentator, and I give the floor to Dr. Aisha Nazir from Fujitsu. Please, Aisha.
Thank you.